Jesus said, if you're persecuted, remember I was persecuted. If you suffer and you have to, if you're put through pain, remember I did it. I prepared the way for you. As a message of hope, there are several people out there that know better than to obey their country blindly, and that our country was actually founded by people that spoke up, that spoke truth to power lovingly. And I think that our country needs more of those individuals to be able to stand up and lead by example, by loving example, and not back down from their convictions, be they moral, ethical, or religious. My name is Logan Laturi. I was born and raised in Southern California. Got through high school all right. I got into college, but I didn't have a way to pay for it. So when I was invited to an event where an Army recruiter was there, I just started listening to him as he was telling me what would be offered by the Army to pay for college. And eventually that was the main initial reason that I decided to join the Army, and other reasons, of course, were travel and just trying to get out of Orange County for a little while. And I tested high enough to where I could choose pretty much any job I wanted in the Army, and so I looked for the ones that paid the highest. One of the highest paid jobs ended up being a 13 Fox, which is also known as a forward observer or a fire support specialist. And they move with an infantry unit, and when the platoon leader, the infantry platoon leader needs artillery, mortars, naval gun fire, close air support, the forward observer is the one that is a liaison between the infantry and that asset. So I acted as the eyes for those assets. I was in Hawaii for about a year, enjoying the sun and everything else that Hawaii has to offer for about a year and 2 days. I left Hawaii January 19th, 2004, and I spent about 14 months in Iraq in OIF 2. While I was there, I was a specialist, or an E4 pay grade in the Army, and my job was essentially to, along with the job that I had for being the observer for the artillery, we were also utilized as information specialists. So we were the ones that were given all the pamphlets saying, we're the good guys, these are the bad guys, here's some money to fix your house, those kinds of things. But I did do my real job a few times, several times. And again, that included not too much artillery, but a lot of mortars, a lot of close air support, and a lot of attack helicopters. And we saw a lot of the country. We were in Samarra, Najaf, Diwania, Mosul, Tal Afar, Syrian border. I know I'm forgetting a few of them. And essentially what our job was as a battalion was to respond to high intensity conflicts that they needed light infantry soldiers at as quickly as possible. A good example of what we were utilized as, near the end of the year, we thought we were going to be home by the holidays, and that changed in late October. I was in bed in my in my little Connex, and I think it was at 10 or 11 at night when my supervisor came in and told me to wake up and start packing. And by midnight, we had our trucks loaded up, and we were on our way up to Mosul to provide an additional presence during the election period in January of '05. I think what I made a concerted effort to do was to understand why I was there, why we were there, what we were doing, did I agree with it. And while I was there, I actually read the 9/11 Commission report. I started reading Newsweek a little bit more. I started to try and figure out at least my place in the geopolitical kind of scheme of things going on. And the more I learned, the less complacent and blissfully ignorant I became. And that objective approach to my place in, I guess, reality, I started to learn a lot more about the political structure and the way things work. So I got back, and for a few months I just kind of decompressed. I think we got back in February, mid-February, and in May I met a really great woman. We started dating, and by the end of June or July of that year, I met her parents, and her parents were definitely a little bit different than I expected. The first time I met them, I was at dinner. I went to dinner at their house, and her dad actually said, "You know, I'm going to be honest with you." At that time, my nickname was Lucky, and he said, "Lucky, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really like military guys." And so I kind of held my breath for a minute, like trying to figure out where I was going to go. And he said, "But I think that's a weakness that I have, and I think that that's something that the Lord is calling me to fix about myself. So I'm glad my daughter is dating you." As the time went on, I began to see more and more how both of her parents and a lot of her family really lived the Bible instead of just read about it. And I began to develop my own spiritual kind of journey, and at that time that was really all it was for me. And I started to take a lot of things that I read about in the Bible more seriously because of the example that I had from them. So by January of 2006, I enrolled myself in a New Testament history class. I began to be able to understand the historical validity of the Bible and how it's a recorded document validated by outside sources. So I was trying to figure out, am I a Christian? What does it mean to be a Christian? I've heard all the don'ts, I've heard all the instructions and everything, but what does that mean I am, if I am a Christian? Not what I'm not. So I was trying to apply this to my life, and I realized in large part that I wasn't applying it to my profession, which was a large part of my life. It was about 24 hours a day of it. So I particularly started trying to figure out what it meant to be a Christian soldier and what it meant to live a Christian witness inside the army or as a soldier. And I couldn't find a lot of the justification I needed because the large part of my job is destroying as much as possible of whatever I was told to. Human life, personal property, enemy equipment. So I couldn't find it. So I started turning to spiritual mentors. I was asking lay people. I was asking my professor at the New Testament history class. And one thing he taught us before we really got into the whole class, he said, when you turn to the Bible, if you believe that it contains the truth, or that it's divinely inspired and it contains God's word, and that God is basically better than you and is a lot more trustworthy than you might be, then you should allow the Bible to shape your beliefs as opposed to your beliefs shaping the Bible. And by that I think he meant, if I go into it thinking that the world is one way, however I perceive it, and then I read the Bible and shape the Bible to mean what I've already perceived and shaped the world to be, then I'm misinterpreting the Bible. Because it has a very clear message, and I think when you read it for yourself and you want to really understand what it's really saying, I think it jumps out at you. And it did me. In a nutshell, I don't think that in the post-Messianic period, after Christ has come and given us a new covenant, I don't think that Christians are called to kill anybody at any time under any circumstances. And so that put me in a difficult position in my job because my professional obligations were pretty much to do that.